Hey, what's up guys? Today I'll show you a horror anthology film, Coffin Homes. Spoilers ahead, watch out and take care. The film begins with a rich family gathered around the dining table as they celebrate their mother waking up from a coma. However, their celebration quickly becomes a heated argument when the youngest and the only guy in the family brings up money. They want to sell their villa and split the money as the housing market is booming again. As they fight over the house's will, their mother stands up from her wheelchair, shocking her children. She goes to the kitchen, and her youngest son follows her there. However, as they return to the dining room, the youngest son has a knife stuck in his stomach. The siblings scream, freaking out at the sudden turn of events. Their mother has become possessed and begins to kill her children. She kills one by extending her feet underneath the dining table and plunging them into her daughter's stomach. Then she kills another daughter by dropping the chandelier on her and stabbing her with a pork fork. Her eldest daughter tries to fight back, but the mother mercilessly repeatedly stabs her with gigantic knives and then takes her heart. She returns to her wheelchair like nothing happened and does not kill her remaining daughter, Ms. Shan. The helper informs her that the mother has actually been dead for 2 days. The scene then changes to Jimmy, a real estate agent, selling a flat to a stingy couple. Currently, the city of Hong Kong has been experiencing a housing crisis due to the lack of space and inflated property prices. That's why people are willing to pay millions of dollars for a small-spaced apartment just to have a roof over their heads. However, Mr. Stingy wants to buy a flat in the central area. So Jimmy mentions a death flat he knows, an apartment that had someone die in it. The death flat is 50% cheaper, but Mr. Stingy is a stingy old man and wants a bigger discount. Meanwhile, a flashback reveals that the rich family's siblings have been talking about selling the villa and splitting the cash way, back when their mom is still in the hospital. On the other hand, Jimmy meets his girlfriend, who is also a real estate agent in another company. They enter the death flat to eat and do a bathtub workout. Later that night, while they are asleep, the creepy ghost owner disturbs Jimmy's girlfriend in her sleep. He's crawling on top of the girlfriend and drops his skinny body on hers, humiliating her in the name of haunting. The girlfriend breathes heavily as she looks away from his old and veiny face. However, the ghost owner does not harm them because Jimmy always keeps his flat clean and tidy despite some smelly workout. A few days later, Mr. Stingy calls Jimmy and asks about the death flat. Jimmy shares that the owner killed his wife and hung himself. The authorities still haven't found her body yet. On the other hand, foreigners settle into Mr. Houseward's confined space housing. Despite the compact space of his housing, Mr. Houseward even wants to cut it even smaller to create another room to rent for profits. Mr. Houseward measures the area with the help of a little girl holding the distance meter. However, the girl leaves him as there is someone else holding the distance meter in the room. Concurrently, Ms. Shan watches the helper burn the bodies of her family in their villa's backyard, attempting to cover up the killing in the house instead of informing the authorities. Later that day, Jimmy meets Ms. Shan as she wants to sell the villa. She wants Jimmy's expertise and to get an estimate on how much the villa will sell for. Jimmy suggests she gets an estimate from the bank too to sort out the land rights. Jimmy then asks if the house is clean, and of course, Ms. Shan lies that it is. After meeting with her, Jimmy is called to his boss's office. His boss proposes the ant mover plan, where hundreds of people would move in and sleep in condominium-type housing and move out in the morning. It is to occupy the houses to catch the developer's attention and hopefully solve the city's housing crisis. The people can stay in the housing until the developers buy the establishment. Suddenly, a group of men interrupts the meeting. They show documents to Jimmy, saying that he is his girlfriend's guarantor. But unfortunately, his girlfriend has gone missing. She has been missing for 5 days, and Jimmy has no choice but to pay her debt as he is his girlfriend's guarantor. However, the debt collectors give him 2 days to find his girlfriend and be free from any responsibility. And if he fails to find her, he needs to pay her debt. So Jimmy immediately goes to the places they used to go, repeatedly calls her, and contacts their mutual friends, but there's no progress. Later that day, Jimmy opens the death flat as he has no place to stay when his girlfriend suddenly appears. She hides her face in a mask and a red hoodie. The girlfriend confesses that she took a huge amount of loan in his name to speculate on stocks. When she failed to pay the money, everything was taken from her. His girlfriend quickly changes the topic and tells Jimmy about the ghost owner bothering her last night when they were in the flat. The girlfriend cries as her world crumbles upon her, so Jimmy comforts her with his muscles. However, he removes the hoodie off her head, revealing her decomposed face. Jimmy screams in horror while his girlfriend runs away and vanishes. Jimmy gasps loudly as he wakes up, but he immediately gets out to look for her. However, 2 big men stop him and return him to the flat. They are other debt collectors that Jimmy's girlfriend took the loan from. Jimmy asks for more time, but the men torture him, causing his blood to squirt on the walls and floors. Jimmy tries to run away, so the men chase him with their machete knives. However, the men stupidly slash themselves instead of Jimmy, causing their blood with diabetes to taint the flat. But it is not over. The ghost owner appears and he angrily kills the debt collectors, throwing them off the balcony. The owner faces Jimmy and shares that he was a butcher, but Jimmy can only scream from the horrors he just witnessed. The following day, Mr. Stingy contacts Jimmy again, as he is interested in buying the death flat. Jimmy quickly returns to the death flat despite the bruises, injuries, and wounds from last night's event. As soon as he enters, the bloody walls welcome him. Shortly after, Mr. Stingy arrives and is fascinated by the blood on the walls, which ironically created a postmodern style in the flat. But as the stingy man as he is, Mr. Stingy wants to buy the death flat for $5.2 million instead of its original price of $7 million. Later that day, Mr. Stingy changes his mind and is willing to buy the death flat for $6.8 million. So they arrange the signing of the papers for tomorrow afternoon. On the other hand, Mr. Houseward wakes up from the sound of a violent movie playing on Daniel CC Movie Channel. He goes down from the bunk bed, shuts it off, and returns to sleep. However, a little boy ghost, named Ghostboy, follows him, sits on top of Mr. Houseward, and slashes his stomach. Mr. Houseward's intestines quickly get out from his stomach, but for some weird reason, Mr. Houseward is still asleep. However, when he scratches his stomach and feels his blood, Mr. Houseward immediately freaks out. He screams frantically and is in hysterics about his intestines coming out, confusing his family. It reveals that Ghostboy did not actually slash his stomach and just created an illusion to mess with Mr. Houseward. The following day, Mr. Houseward flicks Ghostboy's ear for messing with him last night. Later that day, Mr. Houseward and his wife burn incense and ghost money for Ghostboy, hoping that the kid will stop messing with them. Mr. Houseward tells his wife that Ghostboy's mother abandoned him and his father when he was a child. Then, when he was 4 years old, he died of gas poisoning in Mr. Houseward's housing. That's how he became a wandering ghost here. They want to consult with a Taoist priest to help them, but it costs a lot of money, so they have no choice but to return Ghostboy to his father. Meanwhile, investigators find the two debt collectors' bodies and another decaying woman's body in the bushes outside a building. The continuous rain washed away their stench. That's why for weeks, no one found their bodies, especially the woman's corpse because of that. Jimmy is called to the death flat as he is the real estate agent working on it. The police question him and the old neighbors downstairs for their statements. As they investigate, Jimmy's boss calls him and informs him that a client from his girlfriend's agency has bought the death flat for $7 million. Just then, Mr. Stingy calls him, asking about signing papers of that death flat. Jimmy delivers the sold-out news, frustrating Mr. Stingy. But he tells Jimmy that he is willing to pay any amount for the death flat, so Jimmy tells him that he can get it back for $9.5 million. Meanwhile, the old neighbor downstairs from the death flat finds a cell phone on her balcony. She uses it and texts Jimmy to meet her at the death flat. On the other hand, Ghostboy disturbs a tenant by flying in the air, just because he is in his old room. The tenant's screams catch the other tenant's attention, but Ghostboy is unbothered by this and instead plays a game with the children. They hide underneath a blanket and walk around with a flashlight. The foreigner tenant counts the kids and is beyond terrified after counting 5 kids instead of only 4. Concurrently, Mr. Houseward takes Ghostboy to a noodle shop restaurant, where he gives the kid's memorial photo to his father. Jimmy goes to the death flat to meet his girlfriend, but instead he meets the ghost owner's anger as he dislikes Jimmy selling his flat. Jimmy breaks free and hides behind the floor door, while the ghost owner faces 2 debt collectors looking for Jimmy. They try to run to the elevator, but the owner lifts them into the air. Jimmy quickly gets inside the elevator with a delivererman and the old woman downstairs. The old woman and Jimmy unconsciously wet themselves from fear. Later that day, Jimmy meets with a policeman who updates him about his girlfriend's case. He is the primary suspect, as he was the last person his girlfriend was seen with. They checked the CCTV footage and figured out that the 2 debt collectors were connected to the case. Also, they found him covered with bruises in the footage. Jimmy and Ms. Shan accidentally meet at the cemetery a few days later. The police have confirmed that it is his girlfriend's corpse in the woods. Later that day, Jimmy goes home to his father, Mr. Houseward, to stay for a while as he has no place to go. Jimmy meets his stepmom and 2 little stepbrothers who do not make him feel like an outsider. Jimmy informs them about the Ant Mover project, hoping that they might find hundreds of people to cooperate. They let him stay in Ghostboy's old room as the kid has been given back to his father. However, Ghostboy returns later that night and scares Jimmy a little bit before vanishing again. The following day, Jimmy takes his brothers to Ms. Shan's villa, while Ghostboy goes with them. Jimmy lets them wander around the luxury flat. After the tour, Jimmy drives home with his brothers, who experience Ghostboy's rage. Ghostboy uses his powers as a ghost to punish one of the brothers for not letting him eat. After messing with the little kid, Ghostboy spreads his wrath in the housing and hurts Mr. Houseward's family for kicking him out. Jimmy steps in, calms down everyone, and promises Ghostboy that he will find him a home. However, Ghostboy is not done. He destroys the rooms and chokes the foreigner tenant who badmouths him. The family quickly makes a train and hides underneath the blanket, a play that Ghostboy loves. Ghostboy joins them and happily plays the game. Later that day, Jimmy shows Ghostboy a brochure about the luxurious flats he can stay in and convinces him to leave the compact-spaced house. So later that night, Jimmy takes all of his father's tenants to the end mover housing projects. The following day, Jimmy's other boss informs him that he needs the ghost owner's signature to close a legal transaction of the death flat, as there is no his offspring to pass the ownership to. Later that day, the debt collectors destroy Jimmy's office as he fails to find his girlfriend and pay off her debt. They also beat the boss, who dismisses his bruises and encourages Jimmy to come back to the death flat and ask for the ghost owner's signature so they can profit. Although scared, Jimmy returns to the flat and informs him that a stingy client is willing to buy it for $9.5 million. Upon hearing this, the owner looks and asks for his wife to come out to talk about the news. He then shares that he killed and chopped off his wife after she asked him for a divorce, forced him to sell the flat, and commanded a bigger share. After chopping her off, he hid her body parts in the flat. Jimmy gives him the documents to sign, but unfortunately, there are two names on the ownership. The owner's signature will be useless because they also need his wife's signature. This devastates and frustrates Jimmy, but the bad news is not done. The owner confesses that he was the one who pushed his girlfriend off the balcony after finding out that she had sold the flat at a pretty low price. The owner insincerely expresses his apologies and continues to look for his wife. Just then, the two debt collectors he killed show up and create a mess in the flat. However, the owner is much more experienced in ghost martial arts. He beats the newbie ghosts up, even beheading one of them for coming back as ghosts in the flat. Then the owner finally finds his wife's remains in the walls, so he pulls them out and talks to her like she is not bones. However, the nightmare is not done. More debt collectors enter the flat, so Jimmy tells them to use the contract as collateral. The owner chops off a dead debt collector in front of the debt collectors. The rest try to run their ass away, but the beheaded bodies stop them. Their blue blood squirting all over the flat. The supposedly signing off the contract soon turns into chaos as the mad owner chops the debt collectors. Jimmy tries to run away from the chaotic and bloody scene. Ghostboy suddenly shows up and helps him escape. While in his madness, the ghost owner instructs Ghostboy to take Jimmy to hell to Yamaraja, the god of death, in order to close the deal. Ghostboy takes Jimmy to the building's trash chute, which becomes a portal to the underworld. Jimmy meets Yamaraja, who immediately signs the contract. After that, Jimmy returns to the world of the living, where his life finally turns around for good. The death flat gets renovated and is now home to a foreign couple, and Ms. Shan gives the villa sale to Jimmy. The film ends with Jimmy, his brothers, and Ghostboy moving into the villa for the meantime until a client buys it. This is Daniel CC Movie Channel. Stay safe and enjoy your day.